So, just a couple days ago, Apple released their brand new chips in their new MacBook Pros. The specs are crazy. But should you buy one for your music production? Today we're gonna talk about just that. So I've been running this 13-inch MacBook Pro, with the M1 chip, for about a year now. It is crazy fast. The battery life is insane. It's crazy fast for video and photo editing. Like Final Cut Pro is insanely fast on this M1 MacBook Pro. I did a video almost a year ago now comparing this to my trash can Mac Pro that I use to run the entire studio. And I'll put that link down in the description, so after this video, you can check that one out if you'd like to see how they compare, see if you should upgrade. And there'll also be links down in the description for all these new computers to go check them all out. Now, one of the issues that I had when I first picked up this M1 MacBook Pro, when they first dropped about a year ago, is that none of the software that I use for music production, my DAW, Pro Tools, none of my plugins, like literally none of it was compatible. Now, if you're not familiar, Apple included with these new computers, and they still do on the brand new ones they just released, a software called Rosetta. And basically what it is it's kind of like a shell that allows you to run software that's not yet optimized for the M1 chips on an M1 Mac. Now, what this meant is I actually was able to run Pro Tools through Rosetta when this first came out. However, most of the plugins would not work, and still most of the software that I used would not work. Like UAD, the interface and the UAD console and the UAD plugins literally wouldn't work at all when this first came out. Now, slowly, little by little, over the past year, these companies have been updating their software, the DAWs and the plugin companies and everything that you would use for music production. Little by little, they've been updating and optimizing their software for the M1 Macs. Now, this M1 MacBook Pro here is my photo video editing machine, and it is a monster for that. But I'm still running, a year later, I'm still running the trash can Mac Pro to run my studio here. Now, I've been waiting for the new release of the new Mac Mini, because I figured the next version of the M1 chip, the M1X, the M1 Pro, the M2, whatever it was gonna be, now we know it's the M1 Pro and the M1 Max. I've been waiting for them to update the Mac Mini with these new chips, and this new Mac Mini was going to replace this trash can Mac Pro. Unfortunately, we're not gonna get that new Mac Mini this year, so they've got the new chips out. They just released them. They're only going in the new, bigger MacBook Pro laptops. Now, specifically what I was personally waiting for is the ability to have more than 16 gigabytes of RAM. In these original M1 MacBook Pros and the M1 Mac Mini, I mean, they're monstrous computers, but you can only get up to 16 gigabytes of RAM. Now, if you're doing a lot of programming, a lot of soft synths, a lot of software production, like soft synths and virtual instrument heavy productions, man, you're gonna max out 16 gigabytes halfway easily. So I was hoping that the next version of these chips would allow for more than 16 gigabytes of RAM, and they do, and that's awesome. Like I said, unfortunately, it won't be coming to the Mac Mini, probably until next year. But let's talk about the laptops, the new laptops with the M1 Pro and the M1 Max chips in them. Now, the specs on these are insane. The benchmark tests that I've seen here on YouTube, I'm not gonna go through all the details of this because that's not the purpose of this video, but these computers are crazy. They're crazy, and I think one day they are going to be absolutely incredible for music production. But you might not want to buy one just yet. So something I would suggest you all to do, and what I did, is I went through a list of all of my plugins and all of my software. I made a list of every single thing that I use on a regular basis, things I can't live without, because we all have plugins that, I mean, if I wasn't able to use a particular couple plugins, I'd probably be okay. But there are certainly core things that I have, certain plugins, certain virtual instruments I can't live without. So I went through and I made a list of these to make sure that they were all compatible with the new M1, M1 Pro, M1 Max chips. First, I want to say that I do understand that this is a massive undertaking for these companies to rewrite the code for all of their programs, all of their plugins to run on an entirely new chipset. I understand that it's a massive undertaking, but it's been a year. It's been a full year, And the amount of companies, big players, which we're gonna go over them here in a second, that are still not compatible is pretty mind-blowing to me. So before I go over the stuff that's not compatible that you should probably check into, I just wanna mention my Patreon real quick. I've just recently started a Patreon. Thank you to all of you that have signed up already. I've only announced it on Instagram. On my Patreon, there's going to be really in-depth mix tutorials, mix breakdowns from big songs, successful, popular songs that I've mixed, and I'm gonna break down the mixes on them. We're gonna do a live Q&A, and so you guys can ask questions, we can chat together in real time. There's merch available, awesome hoodies, and all kinds of stuff that's included in the Patreon. And this is gonna be the place where I host really in-depth mix tutorials and really in-depth stuff that just won't quite work here on YouTube. I'm not gonna stop doing tutorials on YouTube, but the Patreon is gonna be where the really educational, in-depth stuff is going to live, and I'm really pumped to be able to have a place for that stuff to go and for it to work there. So I'll put a link in the description below if you wanna check my Patreon out, if you're interested in signing up. I hope it really helps each and every one of you, and I'm looking forward to interacting with all of you on a lot more personal level. Okay, so the stuff that I use on a daily basis, I cannot do my job without. First one, massive hit, all of Plugin Alliance. None of Plugin Alliance's plugins are optimized for M1, which is, man, it's crazy to me. I use the SSL channel strips. I use a handful of their channel strips. I use the black box. I use unfiltered audio. Like, I use quite a few Plugin Alliance plugins, and they're on every mix. Not compatible. Nearly all of the Slate plugins, so they have kind of a running list of stuff that is updated. Most of them is not. So for me personally, this means Trigger and Steven Slate drums. I use those, especially Trigger. Trigger's on every session almost. And Steven Slate drums, if I'm ever gonna program a realistic drum kit, I do use Steven Slate drums. Not compatible, so yeah. Native instruments. Almost none of the native instrument plugins and players and virtual instruments, almost none of them are optimized for M1 Max. So for me, this means battery. First and foremost, I use battery on nearly every session. And I use a bunch of their soft synths, a bunch of their synthesizers. And I literally can't do what I do without them, or without completely changing what I do and finding an alternative. Not compatible. Now, before I go on, this is not to say that these plugins and these virtual instruments literally won't run. What it means is they're not supported, and so if you have an issue, there's no way to get it fixed, and you're just kind of on your own. It's like the Wild West if you decide to make this upgrade. And unfortunately, in a professional environment like this, I mean, I run between 8 and 16 hours a day here professionally with clients in. I got deadlines. Like, it's just not an option for me to run stuff that's not supported. If you're more of a hobbyist, or if you don't often work in a professional setting, or when you have clients in and everything has to function, you know, you might be more willing to take the chance. Unfortunately, I cannot. Now, there are a whole bunch of other plugins that I use that claim that they are compatible via Rosetta. So while some of these might run, still no guarantee. And then the other question, which is really interesting, and this is something that I don't have the answer to, is that Logic is obviously optimized for M1. It's an Apple product, and so you should have no issues running Logic. Pro Tools has finally been updated. It took forever for Avid to update Pro Tools, but the newest version of Pro Tools is optimized for M1. But if you're trying to run plugins, this is the question. If you're trying to run plugins that will only run through Rosetta, but your DAW runs natively on the M1 chip, will those plugins even work since you're not running your DAW inside of Rosetta? I don't know the answer to this, and the questions are kind of endless still, unfortunately. There's just still lots of software that's not compatible. For me personally, software that will absolutely keep me from doing my day-to-day job. And also, I'm pretty bummed out. No new Mac Mini. 16 gigabytes is not enough for my new rig. I was gonna move to a Mac Mini. Doesn't make much sense for my setup to run a laptop here. I'm not gonna lie, you guys, I'm pretty bummed about all of this. I have no interest in moving to PC, so you can save those comments. I'm Apple. I'm gonna stay Apple. But I'm pretty bummed out that a year later, I still can't upgrade my whole system. And I understand what kind of massive undertaking it is for these companies. come on, guys, it's been a year. It's been a year. And some of these companies have made zero progress. It's not like they've updated a few plugins, like they've made actually zero progress towards this update. And that's a bummer for me because I love this laptop. I really love this laptop, and especially for video and photo editing work. Man, it's insane. And I want to take advantage of these new, more powerful computers for my music production. Just can't do it yet. So if you're thinking about updating, make a list of every single thing you can't live without and double check. All you got to do is Google it, like Plugin Alliance M1 compatibility, and do that for every single thing that you can't live without, because it would be a real bummer to spend thousands of dollars on a new machine that's like the best of the best money can buy, and then it be a paperweight because you can't run your studio on it. Hope that this helped you guys. Don't forget links in the description for everything that we talked about, link to the Patreon in the description, and also link to my old video comparing this to the Trash Can Mac Pro in the description. Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.